On one of the cleanest television programs ever, she played a polished secretary, was America's dirtiest comic, but everyone was stunned to learn the secret that Redd Foxx and Nancy Culp shared behind the Hollywood limelight. It was more than a passing fancy. It was something more serious and dangerous, and much riskier in their day. They were aware that their careers may be terminated if they were discovered. Nevertheless, they went ahead and did it, and the truth eventually surfaced decades later, and it alters all of your preconceived notions about them. On August 28, 1921, Nancy Culp was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, being the only child. "I grew up in a household that valued education. They lived it." Her mother was a teacher before rising to the position of principal. A superintendent was her grandfather's job. Her family had also relocated to Florida by the time she was a teenager, in search of better prospects. Nancy was formed into something unique by the combination of rigorous education and Southern sunshine. A woman who would eventually become an expert in languages, journalism, the military, and Hollywood. Nancy was not merely intelligent. She could not be stopped. She graduated from Florida State College for Women in 1943 with a degree in journalism. She then went one step further and graduated from the University of Miami with dual master's degrees in French and English. It wasn't a show for her. While still in school, she was already writing feature articles for the Miami Beach Tropics, where she profiled celebrities like Myrna Loy and Clark Gable. She had a cool, collected voice that captivated listeners thanks to her keen intellect and passion for storytelling. It wasn't just academics, either. She was a member of Pi Beta Phi and was adept at moving around any space, including lecture halls and red carpets. The war then broke out. Nancy left her studies and joined the Navy in 1944, believing that she had a bright future ahead of her. She became a member of the All-Female Reserve Unit, or WAVES, and advanced swiftly to the rank of Lieutenant Junior, not a ranked officer, not a nurse, nor a secretary. She served until 1946 and received awards such as the American Campaign and Good Conduct Medals. Later on, she acknowledged that she enjoyed the all-female setting. However, comfort wasn't the only consideration. It was about leadership, independence, and demonstrating her ability to compete in a male-dominated world. She didn't slow down when the conflict was over. She returned to journalism and continued to write about celebrities. However, something was different this time. She relocated to Hollywood and married Charles Malcolm Dacus in 1951. She intended to use her writing abilities behind the scenes at MGM while working in publicity. However, after only 3 weeks on the job, renowned filmmaker George Cukor noticed something that others had overlooked. He noticed a star after glancing past the keyboard. Nancy was persuaded to try out by Cukor and casting director Billy Gordon. She debuted in the movie The Model and The Marriage Broker that same year. The woman who used to write about stars was now one herself. She accumulated almost 30 film credits during the following 20 years. She portrayed Audrey Hepburn's maid in Sabrina. She played the eccentric Miss Grunecker in The Parent Trap. She also had a way of remaining in your memory, even though many of her roles were minor and occasionally uncredited. She shone without a spotlight. Strange spinsters and austere women with surprising warmth became her speciality. Even if you didn't know her name, you were familiar with her features. In 1970, she even provided the voice of a horse in Disney's The Aristocats. But her private life was a mystery. On April Fool's Day, 1951, she wed Dacus. Already, the timing seemed to be a hint. 10 years later, in 1961, while Nancy's TV career was just getting started, they got divorced. She ignored all inquiries about Dacus, never remarried, and never discussed the relationship. He was allegedly gay. Some thought the marriage was a front. In any case, Nancy held that chapter tightly. She lived alone after the divorce and was never connected to another love partner. It's difficult not to question how much of the acting was done by a woman who portrayed lonely folks so brilliantly. The Bob Cummings Show was her major television debut. She portrayed the quirky bird watcher in a pith helmet, named Pamela Livingstone. It was humorous, strange, and effective. Nancy transformed this eccentric into a memorable figure. Between 1955 and 1959, she only made 15 appearances, but that was sufficient. Paul Henning, the show's creator, never forgot her. Nancy was cast as Jane Hathaway, another eccentric bird lover, when he developed the Beverly Hillbillies, although this character would go on to become famous. Nancy appeared on every major television program in the 1950s and early 1960s before the Beverly Hillbillies. She portrayed a curtsy coach on Perry Mason, a maid on I Love Lucy, and an inebriated waitress on Maverick. She was always memorable, whether she was a math teacher or a nosy neighbor. She portrayed two distinct characters on My Three Sons in 1962 alone. She was adored by casting directors because she could play any part, do it flawlessly, and in a single scene, evoke strong emotions or laughter in the audience. Her connection to George Cukor was at the heart of it all. Her life was altered by him. He was more than just a filmmaker. In Hollywood in the 1950s, he was among the few guys who were openly gay. He also had a knack for spotting unconventional talent. Nancy wasn't only given her first movie job by him. When no one else believed in her, he did. He continued to support her, even after one of her scenes from A Star Is Born was deleted without his consent. Despite having worked with some of the top names in the industry, Cukor spotted Nancy Culp's promise and made time for her. And that tells it all. Then came the spinster who was starving for love. They were looking for someone who would stand out from a group of country people, had a keen voice, and looked clever. Nancy Culp was chosen by CBS to play Miss Jane Hathaway for this reason. The concept was straightforward, but amazing. Place a family of naive Ozark millionaires next to a refined, dignified woman. It was successful. Nancy's severe stance, serious tone, and pointed jawline were a wonderful match for the Clampett's untamed, backwards energy. She was more than simply a stiff secretary, though. She was given a twist by the authors. The attractive but dim-witted Jethro was the object of her secret adoration. They also experimented with her real name to add even more humor. Jane Nancy Hathaway was born Nancy Jane Culp. Although it was a subtle internal joke, it gave a character who would become one of the most recognizable sidekicks in television history more nuance. Her efforts were ultimately acknowledged seriously by 1967. Nancy received a nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy at the Emmys. The Beverly Hillbillies was still in the top 10 most-watched television programs in the United States at the time, with a 23.4 rating in its fifth season. She faced well-known competitors Frances Bavier from The Andy Griffith Show and Marion Lorne from Bewitched, who actually won posthumously. But there was more to Nancy's nomination. It demonstrated how much personality she added to a potentially lifeless job. The tight bun in her hair, the clumsy bird watching, and the intense desire all worked. She has previously portrayed a woman who was obsessed with birds. She played a similar role to Pamela Livingstone in the Bob Cummings Show years ago. Miss Jane was modeled after that previous character. Additionally, Nancy was already being referred to as the Bird Lady by fans and on set by the late 1960s. Nancy Culp portrayed Miss Jane in all 274 episodes over 9 complete years. The program dominated American television from 1962 to 1971, scoring 36.0 and 39.1 in its first 2 seasons to rank first in the Nielsen ratings. Even now, that is unheard of. 16 of its episodes remain in the top 100 most-watched television programs ever. It influenced a whole genre in addition to providing entertainment, and Nancy played a crucial part. Even though her character never sought attention or changed her attire frequently, she managed to remain ingrained in people's memory. People still saw her buttoned up, holding a clipboard, and giving Jethro another stern look when they thought of the Beverly Hillbillies, even after 45 years had passed. As part of CBS's notorious rural purge, which eliminated everything that seemed overly country, the show was canceled. However, Miss Jane Hathaway was already well known in popular culture by that point. When Nancy Culp divorced Charles Malcolm Dacus in 1961, her life took a dramatic change. They were wed on April 1, 1951, and had been married for 10 years. A curious incident happened after the split. She never again appeared to be seeing a male, not once. Nancy completely disappeared from the dating spotlight during a period when Hollywood expected women to be associated with attractive guys in order to maintain appearances. Magazines that published gossip noticed. Industry insiders also did. The complete quiet around her romantic life was nearly unprecedented for an actress with a successful profession. Nancy spent her days with women friends, co-workers, and charitable activities rather than romantic excursions. Whispering began. In Hollywood, rumors proliferated quickly, particularly during the 1960s and 1970s. Before long, a lot of people thought they understood why she kept her personal life so secret. In addition to avoiding personal relationships, Nancy also avoided being spotted with men, even for innocuous publicity shots. That wasn't just out of the ordinary, it was intentional. Nancy ultimately gave the world a hint in 1989, when she was 68 years old, and only 2 years away from passing away. She had a conversation with journalist Boz Hadley, who specializes in covering LGBTQ+ celebrities in Hollywood. She didn't say anything loud or audacious, but it was obvious. She used metaphor to carefully craft her response. Are opposites attractive? In your opinion? What? She asked herself. I'm the other sort, would be my own response. Birds of a feather seem to flock together, in my experience. She subtly revealed her truth to anyone who will listen. She was fully aware of her actions. At one point, Nancy referred to any discussion about sexuality in show business as the fatal question. She was also correct. Saying the wrong thing might ruin a career in her time. Nancy, however, made her own path. She had heard the bird metaphor before. She made frequent use of it during the 1970s and 1980s, sneaking it into interviews. Her character from Beverly Hillbillies belonged to a group that observed birds. For those that understood, there was still another level of subdued symbolism, reporters noticed. She never said too much, but she also never said too little. Then in the 1970s, she made an appearance on a game show that took everyone by surprise. Long before most public personalities dared to be candid, Nancy Culp looked directly into the camera and declared that she would never date a guy. Hollywood disliked surprises like that, especially when they came from someone that Americans saw every week in their living rooms. Executives became frightened. It didn't matter if some people said she might lose roles in the future. By speaking her truth aloud, Nancy ended the guessing game. Nancy was more than simply a former TV personality by 1984. Her goal was to become a member of Congress. She entered the U.S. race at age 62, House of Representatives for the 9th District of Pennsylvania. Returning to her home state, she lived in a modest country cottage close to Mifflintown and ran a Democratic campaign in a strongly Republican region. She ran on a progressive platform that included more environmental regulations, lower military spending, and increased taxes for the wealthy. Despite the fact that she had never held public office before, she persisted. "I'm new to politics, but not to life," she said to voters. And they paid attention. Her friends in Hollywood came together in support. Ed Asner held a fundraising event at his Los Angeles home. Prominent figures appeared. Valerie Harper and Betty White. Just that evening, $28,000 was raised. Nancy appeared capable of pulling off an unexpected victory. However, the rug was yanked out from under her just as she was gaining speed. Buddy Ebsen, her former co-star, intervened but did not offer assistance. He made a radio spot for Bud Schuster, her rival. Ebsen claimed in his well-known Jed Clampett voice that Nancy was too liberal and insensitive to the needs of ordinary Pennsylvanians. In 2 weeks, the advertisement was played 147 times. It struck with force. Why was it worse? Even Pennsylvania wasn't where Ebsen came from. Nancy was. It's where she grew up. California was his home state. However, those who had followed the Beverly Hillbillies for years found his voice persuasive. Ebsen contributed $100 to her opponent's campaign to make it even more intimate. Nancy was seated in an Altoona cafe when she first heard the advertisement. She trembled. It was more than just politics. It was treachery. Even on set, she had always found Ebsen challenging. Although their political philosophies had diverged, she never anticipated this. She continued to forbid anyone from mentioning his name in front of her years later. If she had to discuss the show in an interview, she did so in a professional manner, but she made it plain in private. To her he was dead. The outcome of the election was harsh. On November 6, 1984, she suffered a severe defeat. With 59,449 votes, she won. Schuster received 117 out of 203. Compared to his 66.4%, that is only 33.6%. It was far away. With his recent landslide victory in re-election, Reagan rallied Republicans nationwide. However, Nancy lost for other reasons as well. The Epson commercial was painful. She was not taken seriously by voters. Some said it was impossible for a Hollywood actress to comprehend politics. Ironically, Ronald Reagan had won the presidency after making the same leap. For Nancy, however, the door slammed. She didn't run again. The campaign was over. Her political aspirations were dashed. So was any lingering relationship with Buddy Ebsen. She was always angry. According to friends, the mere mention of his name would immediately make her mood worse. "He's not the kind old Jed Clampett you saw on the show," she once said. She meant it. People silently took sides in their conflict, which became famous in Hollywood. Redd Foxx, meantime, was born John L. Roy Sanford on December 9, 1922, in St. Louis. When he was 3 years old, his father left him. Half of his mother was Seminole. He was raised in poverty on the south side of Chicago. He was known as Smiley as a child, because he was always grinning. He began playing washboard in a band when he was 13. By the age of 16, he was traveling to New York on freight trains with nothing except his wildest dreams and unbridled nerves. In bars in Baltimore, he went by Redd Foxx, a combination of his hair and complexion nickname Red, and a chic take on Fox, modeled after baseball player Jimmy Fox. When he took the stage, everything changed, and that term remained. He only received $25 to record Laugh of the Party in 1955, but more than 15 million copies of the soiled comedy record were sold. By 1961, he had released over 35 albums with titles so graphic that white stores were unable to display them. He published almost 50 of them throughout time, with a total sales volume of 10 million copies. In terms of raucous records, he was without a doubt the king. The radio did not play these records. They were a covert hit and were sold under the counter, particularly in minority communities. He even signed with a Frank Sinatra-affiliated label. He was already a legend before TV ever took notice of him. He went on the Chitlin circuit with Slappy White, his companion. In 1947, they made $450 per week, which was a significant sum of money at the time. Unlike most acts, they did not wear blackface. They showed no restraint. They told jokes that no one else dared to tell, while speaking the truth. They were excluded from white clubs, due to segregation. Fox was freed by that rejection. He became bolder, dirtier, and sharper in his comedy. Fox was employed as a dishwasher in Harlem in the 1940s. Because of their hair, his co-worker, a young Malcolm X, called him the Chicago Red and the Detroit Red. They were close. They sold stolen Zoot outfits, slept on roofs, and hustled together. According to Fox, they even joined the Communist Party, but just for the white women and sandwiches. Only after Malcolm's life took a turn for the worse did their friendship come to an end. Fox's disobedience extended beyond the stage. To avoid being drafted during World War II, he pretended to have heart issues by eating half a bar of soap. It was successful. He stayed out of the battle after failing the physical. Additionally, he recorded 5 songs in 1946. He was determined to remain in the entertainment industry at all costs. When Norman Lear offered him to star in the U.S. adaptation of the British program Steptoe and Son in 1970, it was his big break. Having just achieved success with All in the Family, Lear aimed to replicate that enchantment. Fox's rendition was renamed Sanford and Son, in honor of his deceased brother. When it debuted in January 1972, it took off right away. Watts, Los Angeles, was the setting, and portrayed black working-class life with passion and humor. Fox was nominated for 3 consecutive Emmys and had won a Golden Globe by 1973. For the most of its 6 seasons, Sanford and Son remained in the Nielsen Top 10. Fred Sanford, his sour junk salesman persona, became a household name. America laughed every time he pretended to have a heart attack and said, "I'm coming to join you, Elizabeth." His real-life draft-evading stunt served as the inspiration for those moments which fans were unaware of. But there was a cost to success. Fox had a chaotic personal life. His first marriage ended too soon. Betty Jean Harris, his second wife, ran his companies until she reportedly embezzled $110,000. He sought the money back and was granted a restraining order. He was accused of domestic violence by his third wife. The duration of his fourth marriage was only 3 months. His cocaine use skyrocketed behind the scenes. A gold Coca-Cola spoon hung around his neck. On set he snorted. Millions were made, yet the money disappeared. His house in Vegas was overrun by the IRS in 1989. Everything was taken. $12,000 in cash, 7 cars, his ukulele, and Elvis's Rolex. Even the necklace he was wearing. His back tax debt was $755,000, but after interest and penalties, the total came to over $2.5 million. The entire event was broadcast on television. As his life is taken away from him, Redd Foxx, a comic great, stands outside in his underwear. He was fighting backstage, even as the rest of the world laughed with him. Fox and NBC were at odds, enraged that there were hardly any black producers or writers on the show. It had enough white producers, he continued, to cast a Tarzan movie. He insisted on being the owner. He left after they declined. He was sued for $10 million by NBC. He quit Sanford and Son in 1977 to work on a new variety program because he was tired of being ignored and paid too little. At least on paper, they couldn't have been more dissimilar. One was a gritty, boisterous Vegas strip comic who was well known for his dirty party records. The other was a reserved, bookish actress who portrayed a prim secretary in one of the most family-friendly sitcoms in America. However, Redd Foxx and Nancy Culp managed to connect, and what they had was genuine, even though it was obscured by the bright lights of Hollywood. The late 1960s marked the beginning of their story. During a Los Angeles charity function. Since 1962, Nancy has been well known for her role as the prim and proper Miss Hathaway in the Beverly Hillbillies. Redd, however, was among the first black comedians to play in Las Vegas for white audiences, and he had already released over 50 comedy records. They first crossed paths in the 1970s, right before Redd's big break on Sanford and Son. They clicked right away, despite the fact that everyone around them were taken aback by the pairing. Initially, not romantically, but intellectually, both had a strong commitment to civil rights. They both thought that fame should be used for a greater good. Additionally, they were both fed up with the funny Hollywood atmosphere. Nancy arrived with degrees in journalism, English and French. She was a Navy veteran. Redd was educated by adversity and comes from the streets of St. Louis. Years spent on the Chitlin circuit sharpened it. However, they both had a passion for politics, literature, and awkward conversations. They could discuss language, humor, justice, and race for hours on end. Those who witnessed them described it as magnetic. Just a genuine connection, no pretenses, no flirtation. They continued to cross paths at private gatherings as the years went by. Studio lots and network events. They hardly spoke to each other in public. However, their chemistry was evident when they were together. Insiders and stagehands recalled them staying up late, discussing concepts and having cocktails. Despite his crude quips, Redd was profound, introspective, and extremely private, and Nancy was smarter, braver, and funnier than her TV persona. In a way, they were opposites. They were aware that their relationship needed to be kept private for reasons other than Hollywood politics. The 1960s and 1970s were in focus.
Just 0.7% of American marriages were multiracial in 1970. It was still only 1.3% in 1980. Interracial romances were career death because studios were afraid of losing Southern viewers. It was seen to be a serious risk to even predict who was attending supper. Producers advised their stars behind the scenes not to become involved or be detected. There was considerably more to lose for Nancy. Although she never came out formally, many people thought she was bisexual or gay. During that time, belonging to the LGBTQ+ community could quickly ruin your job. Private detectives were engaged by the studios. There were morality provisions in contracts. You risk being banned if you are seen with the incorrect person. Redd and Nancy therefore had to risk everything to be together in public. Redd has his own problems. He was more than edgy. He had a reputation for scandal. His comedic CDs were unrepentant, unvarnished and dirty. He lost millions, had troubled divorces, and once made $4 million in a year before going bankrupt. He was challenging but intelligent. A contract issue caused him to leave Sanford and Son in 1977, leaving his co-star in the dark. Already, networks were apprehensive. He might be killed by one more controversy. Nancy too, she would also be pulled into it. Thus they remained silent. However, in 1989, a change occurred. In an interview, Nancy alluded to a lost opportunity with a bold co-worker. She never gave names. Birds of a feather flocked together, she observed. It went against everything that people had read and believed about her. She gave credit to those whose work defied social conventions. Despite its subtlety, it was a whisper from a woman who had lived her entire life in secrecy to anybody who paid attention. Nancy received a cancer diagnosis in 1990. 1 year later, long before the risks were recognized, she had been a smoker for decades. The sickness spread quickly. Her body and soul were exhausted by chemotherapy. She vanished by February 3, 1991. Her age was 69. In California's Palm Desert, she passed away softly. Pennsylvania received her body back. Her truths were not publicly revealed, nor was there a lavish Hollywood funeral. Redd passed away 8 months later as well. He passed out on the set of The Royal Family during rehearsals on October 11, 1991. Everyone initially believed it to be a prank, with Redd merely reciting his classic Sanford and Son heart attack line. However, it was genuine this time. Twice he muttered, "Get my wife." He never got better. He was 68. Eddie Murphy, who referred to him as the funniest man he had ever met, paid for his funeral. Finally, once they passed away, the hush ended. Friends began to converse. What they knew was shared by people who had witnessed them together at those gatherings, in those parts of Hollywood. They talked about the meaningful exchanges, the giggles, and the bond. They were more than just pals. They were more than a passing fancy. There was more to it than that. Hollywood would never let them show it because it was real. They had discovered something uncommon in a town that was image-obsessed. Something that wasn't typical. Not star or sidekick, not straight or homosexual, not black or white. Two souls who happened to cross paths when no one else did. Their story wasn't buried, even though they passed away with their secret intact. Because that kind of love never fails to leave an impression.